Hey everybody, we're in the back room. This is the green room for DisrupTV, and we're going to be talking about Bitcoin pricing. Just kidding. Wrong show. We're going to start with reverse order introductions. We're going to start with Crawford. We're going to go to Des and Stewart, and then of course we'll go to Frank, and we'll just share with us where you're calling in from and dialing in from, and of course what you're talking about today. Real quick, go ahead. Crawford, all yours.
Hey, welcome. Thanks everybody for having me. Crawford Del Prete, president of IDC. Calling from the Boston area where we have a raging ice storm going on right now. I'll be talking about the state of overall IT demand, what's going on with the supply chain, talk a little bit about tech earnings, future of work, and then really wrap it all up maybe with a little discussion about Web3 and the metaverse. Look forward to it, guys. Thanks for having me back.
Metaverse. All right, Des. What are you guys going to talk about? Where are you guys calling in from, boss?
Hi, I'm Des, and I'm calling in from just outside London. Halfway between London and Brighton, actually, if you know England. And I'm a co-founder of Thinkers 50, the most important ranking of management thinkers. And we're going to be talking about the ideas that are going to change the world in 2022.
Woohoo! All right.
I'm Stewart. I'm calling in from my office in a farm about 30 miles outside London. Where it's very dark and I'm very lonely. So I'm very pleased to be talking to you all. And I'm also the co-founder of Thinkers 50. So I'll be embellishing what Des says.
And Frank.
Hi, good to see you all. Frank Slootman. I'm the CEO of Snowflake, the data cloud company. What are we going to talk about? Well, you'll find out in a few minutes, I guess. We published a book recently called Amp It Up, and the title pretty much says it all, but we're going to unpack that a little bit and, talk about the experiences we've had. And hopefully, we can regale you with our great stories.
All right. Okay. Well, Elle, all yours. Do a countdown and we'll take it away.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests, your questions live using hashtag DisrupTV. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Surviving and Thriving in the World of Digital Giants. Ray's a regular television business and technology news contributor on Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, CNBC, and Wall Street Journal. He's a global sought-after keynote speaker, and in my humble opinion, one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV, and happy 6th anniversary, my friend.
Happy 6th anniversary. What a video. I'm here with my awesome co-host, Vala Afshar. He's the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of The Pursuit of Social Business Excellence. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his important and insightful tweets. It's not only inspirational, and when he's not hosting and keynoting or leading events at Salesforce, you can find him on speaking at events on Bloomberg, and of course, featuring the insightful analyses here on ZDNet. So thanks a lot. But who do we have today? We've got, I think, a rock star CEO.
Ray, what an honor. I mean, we have some of the best and brightest CEOs on our show, and there's no exception with our first guest, Frank Slootman, CEO of Snowflake, and author of a new book, Amp It Up, which I'm really interested to learn more about. Frank is Chairman CEO of Snowflake. Frank is one of the tech world's most accomplished executives in enterprise growth, leading Snowflake to the largest software IPO ever, after leading ServiceNow and Data Domain to exponential growth and public markets before that. Snowflake reinvented data management for cloud scale computing, and it completely reimagined the notion of a database management system. Data is the beating heart of modern enterprise, and Snowflake's vision is a world with unlimited access to governed data, so every organization can tackle and challenge the opportunities of today and reveal in the possibilities of tomorrow. Snowflake essentially powers digital transformation in a sentence. Now, Frank is the author of Amp It Up, leading for hypergrowth by raising expectations, increasing urgency, and elevating intensity. You can follow Snowflake on Twitter at SnowflakeDB. Welcome, Frank, to DisrupTV.
You bet. Great to be on the program with you today.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, really excited to have you on the show. Normally we'd be talking about all cool things Snowflake, but you wrote a book and we're going to feature the book. The book is amazing. And what we're talking about here is really your experiences along the way. So let's start about the Amp It Up. Why'd you write the book? Why is it important to you? And how do we get started here? So,
you know, it's a really good question. I'm still trying to figure out what the answer to that question is, because I needed a book project like I needed a hole in the head. But what happened was over the last 10, 12 years, people keep coming over to Transom with, hey, you guys ran, 3 very successful companies, different technology, different eras, different everything. What's the secret sauce? Is there a playbook we can extract from you that we can then, repurpose and use ourselves? And we can't really accommodate that conversation with thousands of people, obviously, when you have a day job. So writing a book is sort of the next best thing. And what I really was trying to do, I wanted to answer that question, right? I'm not here to preach to the world like here's the world according to Frank. I really don't care whether people agree or disagree with us. I'm just trying to answer the question. What we think. What is our best guess as to why these companies were consecutively successful over this period of time and massively outperformed the competition in the process. So that's what the book is, and the title of it, Amp It Up. It's a call to action. It pretty much says it all, right? And something everybody can do. Literally, in your next email, your next meeting, you can amp things up, and that's really what the book tries to capture and explain and sort of unpack.
It's amazing. I'm a member of the CNBC Technology Council, and we had the privilege of having you present to us last year, 50, 60 executives of the biggest brands in the world. And I remember the audience being so engaged with your lessons and your guidance. You truly are a mentor to other executives. And you talked about declaring war on mediocrity and raising the sense of urgency. And these biggest executives of the biggest companies were, taking notes and listening to every word you said. So can you describe your keys to enterprise growth? Because you've had an exceptional track record of doing just that, growing businesses.
Well, it starts off by deciding that you're going to lean into growth and make that your singular purpose. People get up every day and there's a lot of lack of prioritization. What are we going to do? As a result, the lack of focus, resources get frittered away. The urgency is not there. People don't understand, what we're doing first and last. And, a lot of CEOs and leaders, they just preside, but they don't drive, right? And you sort of got to do a gut check with yourself. Am I driving, every moment of the day, or am I sort of kind of, watching things happen? And it might be a bit of a caricature the way I'm characterizing things, but it's not too far off, what happens. So, as a leader, you have to amp yourself up. Your whole mental mindset, has to, first of all, we want to get strong mission posture, right? In other words, why are we here? What are we trying to do? Because that anchors absolutely everything. If you don't have strong mission posture, I don't even know. I mean, a mission is not about making the numbers for the quarter. That is not it, right? Because who's going to get excited about that? This execution is a discipline. But the purpose, why are we here, is incredibly important. Now, once you have that mission posture, now you can start to prioritize and resource and focus and align everything as it relates to that mission. You also start to fight up everything that, has no relevance to that mission. That is super important because, people will often say yes to a lot of things when they should be saying no, right? You should be saying no a million times a day, and really filter, through the lens of that mission. Why am I even having that conversation, right? So, once you really lean into the mission and the more crisply and the more potently you define that end state, that future state that you're trying to achieve, and then bring everything else in alignment of that, yeah, I mean, the whole place is going to start feeling elevated and energized, and it's hard to hold it back. It's like unleashing the wild horses. And it's very fun to be there, because every high performer wants to be in an energized workplace. They don't want to swim in glue, right? They don't want to have that just going through the motions of checking boxes and trying to get things off my desk, good enough, pass ball. And that sucks the life out of people in an organization. So you want to kill that, at every turn. And when I say every turn, every encounter, every meeting, every conversation, every check-in, you have an opportunity to change the energy, the dynamic, the urgency, and all those things. So this sounds like, sounds like a good idea, but there is so much room for upping the performance, that lives in that margin. And by the way, you see it in professional sports, right? We're watching a lot of football, obviously, these days. When these teams operate a fraction of a second faster, they upset the rhythm, of the opposing team, right? And all of a sudden the momentum shifts and changes, right? So, and this is the X factor. This is what everybody can unlock if they really, really want to.
I love that. The last 2 weekends of NFL absolutely demonstrated the micro moments of excellence makes a difference. Sorry, Ray, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, big shift. And of course, when you think about that intensity of focus that you're talking about is so important, but it's also making a bunch of conflicted choices. And that's the thing that stuck to me as I was going through the book and going through some of the comments that you have. Those conflicted choices, how do you make those decisions? How do people know how to make those conflicted choices? Because if you don't make them, you just end up languishing, as you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, you learn obviously by doing. The worst thing you can do is having, a whole PowerPoint slide with 12 priorities on them, because that means you have none. Okay, you've already lost. You're already done for, right? But they think they're intellectually really smart because I've thought about everything. Yeah, you thought about everything and you thought about nothing. Okay, and the question I always ask people, and it's one of my favorite intellectual exercises, and that is, look, if you can't do anything else this year, you have to pick one thing. You can't do anything else. You got to pick one. What would it be and why? Okay, just for the sake of the exercise of trying to figure out, what is the highest leverage, most important thing that we have to focus on and resource properly. That's another issue, right? Because when you're not focused, you're frittering away your resources, and again, we're a mile wide and inch deep, and you're not progressing, and you have no velocity, and all these kinds of things. So how do you do the right thing? And first of all, you need to prioritize even when you don't know how to do it. Okay, because you learn by doing. You get feedback when you do things, like whether you're in the right path, you're in the wrong path, right? So, and then you adjust and you adjust. Prioritization is something that you do all the time. I am never certain that I'm doing it correctly, so I'm always paranoid, checking, whether I'm doing it right or not. But prioritizing is probably the worst way out of that dilemma. It isn't easy. That's why these jobs are hard. You can be wrong. That's the whole point of it.
Absolutely. By the way, when I listen to you, I feel so good about myself and Ray, because clearly you chose to be on the show. So for someone who intensely prioritizes, we're so grateful that you're here.
Yeah, it's not easy to crawl through that eye of the needle. Let me tell you, because we do say no a lot, and we're trying to be nice about it. But at the same time, look, I have a day job. There's only so much time we can spend on other stuff before we feel it starts interfering.
Absolutely. So at the beginning, you talked about being mission-driven leader and how important it is for the entire company, all stakeholders, to understand the mission. And it's not meeting the target, revenue number. How do leaders, how do you advise, how do you coach your team to adopt this mission-driven leadership style and keep it, especially during, difficult times like the last 22 months with the pandemic?
Well, one of the things that I talk about in the book is this whole notion of incrementalism and how much I hate it.
Oh my God, it's ridiculously painful torture.
Yeah, but it's human nature to start with where you are and then sort of inch forward, marginally. And again, it sucks the life out of organizations, and it sucks the life out of conversations and meetings. Instead of assuming that the starting point is what it is, why don't we envision the end state, the future that we want to achieve? because now it's all bets are off. We can imagine the craziest stuff that we can possibly think about, and we can talk about it. We can try it on for size, and all of a sudden the dynamic is completely different, and we're now energized because we're excited about what we're embarking on. Now, once you start sort of getting a glimpse of what you're trying to do, now you can work your way back, from that future state to the present, right? And that's really how I prefer to have, that's the mental mindset I prefer to have about everything. Let's work our way back from the future as opposed to, I did 100, last year, so I'm going to do 110 this year. I'm already exhausted just talking about it here, okay? So declaring war on incrementalism is just such a great organizational dynamic technique that you can just adopt in every conversation. If I had nothing, if I had no history, what would I do? And by the way, the threats coming at you are all from people who have no history. They have no ships to burn. Okay, they come with nothing. They are not constrained by the past. And you have already, talked yourself into a corner where the past is already, you're already a prisoner of your own past. Don't let that happen,
Yeah, that happens a lot. Especially in companies with history, companies that middle age out, and it's hard. So how do you keep that frame shift that's required to drive hypergrowth, right? I mean, it's just not natural for people to do this, right? And you see companies languish all the time. They just keep changing the people at the top. They keep changing people at the bottom. They bring some folks. The middle rots out. I mean, we've seen this happen across the valley, and it happens when you hit about 20 to 30 years in. It happens when people are focused on, return on EBITDA. They're not even thinking about anything else. They've lost sight. How do you re-inspire? How do you get that frame shift in place?
Yeah, well, it's a mindset that's really easy for me because it's the only conversation I want to have anyways, but it's a leaning in, kind of a thing, right? For example, sometimes I have an organization that's just barely getting to, one segment of the business is barely getting to the numbers, and then I find people are making excuses. The people in Australia are awful in January, so that's why. No, look, bullshit. Okay, we all show up every single quarter. Okay, if Australia is on vacation in January, you're going to find it somewhere else. Okay. So there's this discipline, we all show up every period, and we have no excuses, zero. That changes the mindset. Once people know there's no excuses, they start thinking differently, okay? And, I remember a conversation years ago, I talk about it in the book as well. I think this was a Data Domain, and I always ask the sales leadership to tell me what their ideas are about next year. In other words, instead of me telling them what it's going to be, I'll ask them, right? So they came up with a number, I think it was 100 million or whatever it was for the year. And they said, well, is that the best you can do? And they're like, well, we got to do all these things. And I'm like, well, if you had to do 125, what would you do differently? If it had to be 125 instead of 100. And they started rattling off a whole list of things. And I'm like, well, why don't we do that then? Okay. My job's really easy, really. Awesome. and the reality is people have far more room up than they realize. I cannot repeat that enough times. That potential, it's all about leaning in. It's like skiing. You got to get over your skis. And we talked about skiing earlier. Yeah. Get over your skis. The skis are designed to get over. Instead, people are on their heels, because they're afraid, if I'm too aggressive and too bold and I don't make it, I'll look back. No. You know what?
You'll look back, leaning back.
Yeah, right. So, skiing on your heels does not end well. We all know that. So.
Well, I'm going to end with a sports-related question or comment, and I hope this doesn't mean that you and I won't speak again because I don't know who you root for, but you kind of remind me of Tom Brady, and it's not an age thing. I'm just saying because if exponential growth was a Super Bowl. At Data Domain, you won a Super Bowl big time. At ServiceNow, you won a Super Bowl big time. And the largest IPO ever. At Snowflake, you won a Super Bowl big time. And I can tell you're not a guy that looks in the past. That's the past and you're moving forward. But I remember listening to you talk about your dad giving you advice when you were working on pretty crappy jobs, summertime when you were a teenager. And you were telling him how hard it was. And he said, son, if you don't want to do that, get better grades. And that was a moment where you realized, all right, I have a path away from doing these really hard work. And I believe, from my memory, it was a pivotal moment for you. So now that you, like Tom Brady, you've had multiple Super Bowls, who inspires you? Where do you go for inspiration? Because you have the same intensity as you had when you started your career.
Well, you by the way, you greatly flatter me talking about Tom Brady because I'm a huge fan. None of the
I was nervous.
By the way, one of the reasons why it's not just all the stats and all the Super Bowls and all that. What I so like about Brady is he only cares about the game. He doesn't want to do victory laps and self-congratulations. He only cares about the game. And by the way, therein lies his secret. Okay. His intense focus on the game and basically blocking out everything else. I mean, if anybody has mission posture, it's Tom Brady, so we can all learn from that. Hell, I try to learn from it, every day because it inspires me greatly. I've been inspired by a lot of historical figures. I'm a history buff. I read tons of biographies, people that are long dead. That's unfortunately there were a lot more great people in the past than in the present. At least in my perception of the world. And by the way, that's fine, because some things just endure and are timeless, and they don't have to be of a contemporary nature. So I greatly admire personal courage. And people that have exhibited that to extraordinary degrees in history, that's something where it leaves me breathless, sometimes. And that's where you get inspiration. Those are role models in the true sense, of the word.
I love that.
Frank, we need more great leaders like you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Frank Slootman, CEO of Snowflake and author of Amp It Up. Definitely check it out on Amazon. A lot of great lessons learned, a lot of great leadership tricks, and more importantly, a principle on actually doing better. So thanks a lot for being on the show, Frank.
Tom Brady of the enterprise. I love that. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Great intensity and focus. I love that. You can't tell that I was a former athlete, but I can so relate to his guidance. Nobody can tell. I was, including my kids. You can't imagine. All right. Talk about individuals that are connecting and shaping the biggest minds in business today. Today we have Dearlove and Stuart Crainer, co-founders of Thinkers 50. Des is a former columnist for the London Times, contributing editor to Strategy Plus Business, and co-editor of the best-selling Financial Times Handbook of Management. Des has taught at some of the world's leading business schools, including IE Business School and the SED Business School at Oxford University, where he's an associate fellow. He's also a visiting professor at Warwick Business School and the author of Archie Green trilogy of children's books. Stewart is the former editor of London Business School's award-winning magazine Business Strategy Review. Stewart's book credits include The Management Century and the biography of the management guru Tom Peters, one of my favorite guests on DisrupTV. Stewart has taught the International MBA at IE Business School and executive education program around the world, including strategic leadership programs at Oxford University. Stewart also is a visiting professor at Warwick Business School. He's also the author of The Atlantic Crossing, based on the experience sailing the Atlantic. Welcome, Des and Stewart, to DisrupTV.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here. You've moved from a rock star CEO to two English buskers.
That's not true.
The rock stars are the rock stars.
The rock. You're the king makers. What are you, king and queen makers? It's an honor to have you on our show. An honor.
Massively honored.
Very pleased to be here. Yeah.
So Des, Stewart, I mean, you guys are celebrating the 20th anniversary last year. Let's get to the origin story. How did it all start? What were you guys thinking about? How do we get people together, or how do we bring a great group of cohorts? I mean, what happened, and how was that story?
Well, as you can probably imagine, it was a lot more sort of simple than that. We were doing some work for an organization that was part of the Financial Times, and they wanted a kind of a vehicle to launch a website. We're back in you're far too young to remember the .com days. It was 2000, and it was that time. And we were having a pizza, actually. We were in a restaurant, and Stuart and I looked at each other and said, well, no one's done a ranking of the management gurus. So it was a journalistic exercise to try to kind of get some attention to this new portal, as they were called in those days. And it kind of grew from there, really. So no, there was no grand plan. It was simply a sort of a cheap journalistic trick to try to get people to tune into what was going on. But it just then took on a life of its own.
And Stewart, that cheap journalistic trick is now.
Yeah, but it's moved on somewhat. Yeah, I think our realization was that there's so much stuff out there. Even 20 years ago, there was a deluge of books, conferences, articles, magazines, ideas, and there was a lot of stuff out there. And the Thinkers 50, the mission really was to make it easier for people to sort out the good stuff from the bad stuff. So we describe what we do as scanning, ranking, and sharing the very best in management ideas. So we publish our ranking every 2 years. The last one was in November 2021, topped by Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School. And we also announced the Thinkers 50 radar list of 30 thinkers to watch. That comes out every January. We just announced one. And every September, we announce new members of the Thinkers 50 Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame.
And we also have our Thinkers 50 Awards, which the Financial Times very helpfully and entirely accurately described as the Oscars of management thinking. So we're involved with a constant stream of content creation and events.
That's amazing. Our most viewed DisrupTV, which I think is about 300,000 views, is Tom Peters. So Hall of Fame. Thinkers 50.
We gave Tom a lifetime achievement award a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
No, what a guy!
What a guy! I mean, you know, we talked to him, and I always feel like it's getting an MBA course when he comes on Disrupt. I feel like I've got 3 credits or 6 credits of college education. So in the 2021 ranking, you decided 11 to 50 would be just not ranked. So you for the first time it was the top 10, and then 11 to 50. But I want to go back to at the beginning. How politically charged, how much pressure did you feel ranking these folks, from Clay Christensen to to the biggest authors and academics and business leaders in the world? Did you do it through a committee? Did you litmus test the 1 versus 2 versus 3? Because I've done rankings before for Huffington Post and Inc. magazine and ZDNet, and I got to tell you, I have butterflies the whole time. I'm nervous. so can you tell me about the process and how you guys agreed to do this?
Well, you are talking to the committee.
Okay, great.
No, we created 10 criteria. It's always good to have, a good sort of scientific process. So we have 10 criteria that we've applied. And then that's sort of changed over time a little bit. Mm-hmm. Obviously, when we started, there wasn't social media, so we were just kind of evaluating media hits. Things like we try to gauge influence, and one of the things we use for that is the number of academic citations. So there is a methodology which makes life easier. But as you know, if you've done rankings, it's fine until you get down into the fine detail of who's number 46 versus 45.
And who you exclude, because 51 is extraordinary, 52 is extraordinary. So where you make that cutoff is, oh my goodness.
The dartboard is not big enough, Vala.
and what's happened with the Thinkers 50 as well as over time, when we started, I mean, management thinking and management ideas was dominated by Americans. American men from Harvard Business School, Wharton. And what's happened over time is that it's really transformed, and now it's truly global. So if you're looking for the best management ideas, you've got to be looking at people in China doing research and running companies in China and elsewhere. So it's become much more truly global. And that's
much more difficult as a result, much more challenging in a way, because you can't just simply look at the American business schools, the classic places you would expect to look, Stanford and Harvard and places like that, and the top consulting firms. It's totally global now. So we increasingly rely on the eyes and ears of people in the community and other people to sort of tell us who to look at as well. So I think that's been a godsend, really.
Yeah, I know. And you picked up things like my former colleague at Forrester, Navi Raju, on Jugad Innovation, which was...
We love Navi. Navi's brilliant.
Yeah. He's brilliant.
And it's amazing kind of concepts, right? And
I can't believe how many of our people you've had on your show as well. It's good. That's sort of that endorses what we're doing, that you invite them on the show. That's fantastic.
We've had, I think, in total maybe close to 20, but about 16 in the last year. And I have to tell you, they're all, without exception, and it's funny, they're great storytellers. I mean, they just have a way of inspiring us in such a short amount of time. So go ahead, Ray. Yeah. So it's
they bring us in, they relate, right? And you're sitting on top of some of the top ideas. And so we would be remiss in not having you share with us what you see the future is based on some of these great ideas, this great thinking that's going on that you're watching and that you have as well in your minds. So share with us what you're seeing, what's coming up for 2022 and beyond.
I think we've gone. Go.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big change we've seen is that when we started 20 years ago, all the ideas were about improving performance, improving shareholder value and things like that, improving market share. And what's changed over the 20 years is that the thinkers we feature all want to change the world now. They want to make the world a better place. So the dialogue has really changed. So you can see that the people we featured on the Thinkers 50 radar, which we've just announced, 30 Thinkers to Watch, which we've just done in partnership with Deloitte for the first time. What's interesting there is people focusing on the big issues. So you've got somebody like Ronnie Chatterjee from Duke talking about, can business save the earth? You've got it. Azim Azhar, who's from the UK, who's the author of a book called Exponential, or Julia Binder of IMD talking about sustainable innovation. So I think those are the kind of the big idea. The big ideas facing the world are now embraced by management thinkers. And I think the other thing that's coming through from the radar is that a strong focus on the human side of technology, and that's really strong. I think you could say that the first decade of this century was a kind of a celebration of entrepreneurship and the dot-com boom and VCs, and then the last decade was about the 2010s. Was all about technology, AI, augmented reality, and so on. And I think this decade, from the thinkers we're featuring and coming across, is all about the humanity, making sense of the technology, making it work for people. And I think that's a really strong message from the people we feature.
I think the other thing that's coming through is as you would expect, we talk about talent shortages. It's like there's a huge realization now that we've got to really widen the ideas pool. So the diversity and the equality and the inclusion agenda is a business agenda. It's not about doing the right thing. It's just the right thing and the smart thing to do to involve more people. And I think that's reflected in the radar list as well, that we got a lot of people with some really strong messages in that space as well, which is fantastic.
Are these examples of how your approach was disrupted over the last 2 decades in terms of first building a list of folks that are driving results for shareholders, and now 20 years later, people are driving holistic success for stakeholders, where it's not just about market share and revenue and EBITDA, but it's about sustainability, equality, trust. So core values are now really drive folks that are doing the best and most important thinking in the world of business.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've learned along the way the importance of trust, community, and openness. Last year, Leon Prieto and Simone Phipps won our Breakthrough Idea Award for their work around cooperative advantage. I mean, that's kind of saying competitive advantage is history. We should be thinking about cooperative advantage. And we really tried to put this to work with the stuff we do and our emphasis on making ideas available to as many people as possible and truly sharing ideas and insights. So we give people the platform to share the ideas. And what's interesting, the people you're featured on the show, people like Alex Osterwalder, Rita McGrath, Nilofer Merchant, they all like sharing ideas. They're genuinely interested in the dialogue. And I think that's what marks people like Amy Edmondson apart from the other people, I think.
But Ray and I have had the good fortune of actually in-person engagements with these folks, whether it's Alex or Rita and others. So we actually break bread with them, and they're so good. When you have the opportunity to meet with them in person. Has anybody asked you guys about your favorite thinkers of all time, or no? It's like asking about your favorite child. That's
something like that. But I think one of the to Stuart's point too, I think one of the big disruptors for us was we started off as journalists, so we were professional skeptics in a way, and we came to this, as I said, with a journalistic eye, and You know, I remember my editor at the time as being assuming that all the management thinkers were, it was all smoke and mirrors. It was all snakeskin. You know, it's like that was the assumption. And then we knew, because we were working in the field, that there were nuggets of gold as well as the fool's gold.
For sure.
So that's partly, you know, that's what we were trying to do with the ranking. But the thing I think the big moment that changed our point of view and disrupted us was we got to know C.K. Prahalad.
Yes.
Who was the originator of core competencies and co-creation, and then latterly and significantly the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. And there he was saying, you know, business done right can actually relieve poverty. It can lift people out of this, you know. And so he was talking we got to them quite well, and we was talking to these two skeptics, and he disrupted us. He made us realize that these ideas actually really could change the world, and they were important. And that was a kind of a Damascus moment really for us to get it. And you know, we were on the journey anyway, but he really accelerated us on that journey. So so he would be certainly a name. Clay Christensen also. The originator of disruptive innovation. He is another. Sadly, no longer with us, but maybe that's okay.
Standing among a real giant. Mental.
Ray and I again had a chance to meet with Professor Clay Christensen. Had lunch with him at an event. Still one of my favorite books, How to Measure Your Life. I mean, went from an HBR article to arguably my top 5 book. It just really personally impacted how I think and how I want to conduct myself. Sorry, Ray, go ahead.
Oh, no, it was the inspiration for my second book, because I was looking at what he was talking about on the levels of innovation and how people were actually skimming off money and actually feeding short-term EBITDA. And that completely set my mind as I wrote my last book. I was like, yeah, you know, this is a big shift in terms of the thinking. We've also had Ram Charan on as well at our conference, and that's always been great. He always looks the same, has the same outfit. We know the story behind that in the back end. But another great thinker along the way. What does that mean when we go out and we look at the next greats, right? Because this is a conversation Vala and I have been having. It's like, who are those next greats? Who are the ones that are emerging, people we should look at? The radar has been an amazing place.
We want them on our show, selfishly.
Yeah, we want them on our show.
We want to learn from them.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the radar list is a good place to start. We've had some, we're very sort of slightly pleased with ourselves in a certain way, because a couple of people that we've picked on the radar have then come really delivered. You know, we say these are the people with potential and promise, but a couple of people have actually really delivered, and they're in the ranking now. So Erin Meyer, a professor at INSEAD, she wrote a book called The Culture Map, and we put her on the radar. And then, you know, she says she looked in her email box and there was a note from Reed Hastings, you know, CEO of Netflix. Just, could you come and talk to Netflix? Because they were about to expand into, you know, 90 countries all at once. And so now, you know, Erin's written a book with Reed, and you know, we spent some time with Reed and helped kind of hopefully, you know, make that combination work. But it's a fantastic book. But yeah, no, it's look at the radar, and some of these people will be the next stars. We promise.
The country, the personal, the team mapping is amazing. What Erin put out there, I mean, it's just some great ideas that are, you know, in play. You know, when you think about where that future is for the Thinkers 50, like, what does it mean? Like, what's going to be the, you know, impact if you were to go back and look, let's say 20 years from now? Like, what will that look like? Have you guys thought through that?
Well, I'll go for that one. I mean, you know, in a sense, it's interesting, you know, hearing Frank talk about mission. You know, our mission is very simply to be the world's most reliable, I've got it written here, most reliable resource for identifying, ranking, and showing the leading management ideas of our age. And the second part is ideas that can make a real difference in the world. I'd like to think going forward that some of these ideas will get some traction, and we'll be able to look back and say, not that we're going to take the credit for it, but just that hopefully we've shared some of the ideas that can actually, you know, make a difference.
That's a great mission, and I can tell you, they're just nice people. You know, when I talk to Dory Clark, she's just the most brilliant, humble person. Whitney Johnson, they're just good people. Like you know, so you do a great job. I don't know if it's intentional or not, where you look at, you know, likability. But
that's not a criteria.
I like all of them.
Anyway. Stuart, what's your view? Where do you see that future?
Well, I think the future, what we're interested in is ideas that make a difference, as Des said.
Durability.
Yeah, well, we want ideas that I went to Malaysia to see the things they've done in Malaysia, and various initiatives and programs inspired by Blue Ocean Strategy, the book by Chan Kim and Rennie Moburn.
Sure.
And whatever you think about the book, it's just incredible. So we met them when they were writing the book. They wrote the book, and now the government of Malaysia is putting all these programs into place inspired by the book. So I think we will continue to be excited by ideas making the transition to reality. And I think there's an awful lot of issues and problems facing the world. So ideas have never been more important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for putting the list together. It certainly is an impactful list. Without exception, folks that are on the list, I mean, when you go to their bios on social media, the first reference is Thinkers 50. So you're clearly, helping us be inspired and educated by connecting us to the best and brightest people in the world. So I greatly appreciate the work that you do.
We're here with the Oscars of management thinking, the folks that are making impact and durable ideas that are being put into use. Thanks so much for being here. Dearlove Stuart Crainer, co-founders of Thinkers 50. Follow the handle Thinkers 50. Check out the website. Check out the radar. You're definitely going to see some of the brightest and most impactful individuals, along with you two. So for making it happen. Thanks, Bert, and congratulations on 20 years.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you. Yeah,
wow.
It's and now we're going to end the show with someone who should be on any list that speaks to extraordinary thinking.
How you guys doing?
Making a big impact. Crawford Del Prete, president of IDC. Crawford was appointed president of IDC in 2019. Prior to his current role, Crawford serves as IDC's chief operating officer. Throughout his leadership, IDC has established as a leading position as the world's most prominent and trusted technology market intelligence provider. Crawford is leading authority on the IT industry and has completed extensive research on structure and evolution of information technology industry. Crawford advises technology and business leaders on how to adapt and change in times when technology is changing the world. He's frequently quoted on Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, New York Times, all of the biggest media outlets. He's also a regular guest on Bloomberg Television, offering insights and perspective. He was awarded the Patrick J. McGovern Award for Management Excellence and was awarded IDC's James Peacock Award for Research Excellence, which is the highest research honor at IDC. You can follow him at Craw, so you can tell he was an early adopter, CRAW. And I have to say, Crawford helped launch DisrupTV as our number2 guest.
Absolutely.
So welcome back, Craw.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. You guys are awesome. It's so great to be listening to the show, and a lot of reflection. I mean, it was great to hear from Frank. It was great to hear from the Thinkers folks. I mean, you guys have done a great job. You've really and I think, and I'm reflecting on my career. It's funny, and Ray, you can probably relate to this. When you grow up as an analyst, you kind of don't get credit for the management or the running the business side of a company. But when I think about what Frank is doing, a lot of that was really resonated in terms of what we've tried to bring at IDC, what I've tried to bring to the company. If you're gonna be here, if you're gonna be focused on a business, time is short, life is short, careers are short. You gotta focus on the stuff that matters. And I just want to give you one quick anecdote. When I became president of IDC now about 3 years ago, I sat down with the management team and I said, look, this is the time. It's before COVID, this is the time that technology is changing everything. And so we changed our vision, and that is to change the way the world thinks about the impact of technology on business and society. And every single day, I repeat that. Every single day, I inspire and push and try to get the analysts to really think about how make our customers think differently about this. Find that nugget. And I think that kind of passion and that kind of focus is super important today, because there are too many people that just put it on autopilot.
I've known you for 11 years, before you were the chief research officer, before you were CEO, and before you were president. And you had that same mission-led mentality as an analyst, serving the interests of your clients. So it doesn't surprise me that your career from an analyst with a trajectory of being president. because you've been intensely focused on customer success, and that makes you actually very unique. So congrats.
I appreciate that very much. Thanks, Vala.
And hey, related to that, I mean, you've been an essential resource to a lot of companies that are coming out of the pandemic. You're definitely a resource during the pandemic, but coming out of the pandemic is a little bit different. We kind of title it the great refactoring, right?
Yep.
Business purposes, missions are changing, the transformation's changing, the values are changing among work life, the values are changing in terms of what a company's responsibilities are, right? And the business models are tougher than ever, right? And this great refactoring is happening. Like, what do you see? What are the big trends you guys are tracking, you think are important, that people watching should know?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Well, for starters, COVID, technology really saved the day in COVID, and we have seen a trend unlike anything else we've ever seen. And I talked about this I think we talked a year and a half ago or so, but let me just put some finer points on it. When COVID hit, we'd never really seen this trend before, and that was that GDP dropped about 4%. Now, every time GDP drops, tech drops harder, except for in COVID. In COVID, tech dropped about GDP went negative. Yeah, okay, fine. Tech went from about 6% growth to about 3% growth. But then it rocketed back. We saw last year in 2021, technology grew 10%. Now, as watchers of the industry, you guys will know, IT hasn't grown 10% in over 20 years. Okay, we've never seen that kind of a rocket back. So companies really did, and they are leaning into tech to make people more productive, to keep people connected, to figure out a way for people to collaborate in a world when they can't be together. And I think now what we're seeing is, and you're seeing this on Wall Street, you're seeing it in general, is that it's a little bit, people are feeling for what the future looks like. And there's kind of this spastic behavior. And you saw it in the quarterly earnings, just recently, where, people will see, Microsoft will have a blowout quarter and the stock will go down. And it's because people kind of like, well, is it really better? Or is this the future? Or are we just looking in the review mirror here? And so expectations are incredibly uncertain right now because we don't know what the rotation out of the world's never, in the modern world, gone from a global pandemic to a global endemic. And, that's where we're going, right? We're not going to get a big signal that basically says it's all over. You can all come out of the cave now. This is going to be a spastic, recovery. And I suspect what you're going to see is a lot of this over the next 6 months. Now, I believe that there's an opportunity in the United States for us by springtime to really have this feel like we figure out how to live with it, and we're starting to move forward, and we're rotating into physical events. But that doesn't mean that the world wants to come back to work and be in the office for all that same amount of time. But that's what the conversation is about right now, is what does this rotation to an endemic look like? And that's what everyone's feeling for right now. And we think what it means is companies are going to lean into automation. They're going to lean into trying to figure out how to automate the repetitive tasks and how to have humans deal more with the exceptions, how to up level people's skills in general, so that they can be more effective in their roles. And I think that's going to be a big part of the next few years, is selectively applying this automation to get more productivity and be able to have the whole company focus on higher value tasks.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm a bit familiar with companies that have blowout quarter after quarter after quarter, and not correlating that to
it's crazy, right? I mean, it's very, very, and again, it's because of this massive uncertainty right now.
Absolutely. So I looked at the IDC forecast report recently, and said direct digital transformation investments grew at a rate of about 16.5% projected from 2022 to 2024,
right,
as compared to 15.5 CAGR for 2022 to 2023. Investment levels, again, projected for the next 3 years, 22 to 24, expected to reach 6.3 trillion. And that's about 55% of all ICT investments by the end of 2024. So when you have Frank talk about having a sense of urgency and amping it up and really being focused on, transformation that can add value to all stakeholders, is digital transformation, has pandemic been an accelerant for what may have been a 2024 CIO roadmap agenda pulled back to 2022? and digital transformation is really going to make or break companies moving forward in the next 3 years.
100%. So COVID was an accelerant to technology investment. And I think that what we don't fully understand yet is, and we don't believe it's necessarily the case, is was COVID something where we pulled forward demand that we would have spent anyway? Or was it that companies use this time to modernize their infrastructure and then will keep investing going forward? Our suspicion is that it's more the latter, that we're going to see sustained IT demand in that 4 to 6% range going forward, starting in 2022 and really out to about 2025. And that's because companies leaned into this technology, and frankly, the barriers to entry have dropped so dramatically. We have so many more people who can now write code, use low code and no code apps, people that can work part-time, they can code part-time, they can help companies create and invent new solutions. So what are we seeing, right? We're seeing applications with double-digit growth. We're seeing the barriers to companies integrating applications never lower. So what does that mean? It means now you've got, so an application typically has at least 2 interdependencies with other applications. Well, now it's not uncommon to see an app with 7 or 8 or 9 dependencies with other applications. We're seeing, you saw it last night with Amazon, or 2 nights ago. Actually, last night you saw you saw that the cloud is not about any one cloud; it's about multiple clouds. So now it's about connecting those clouds and connecting those applications which are resident in those clouds. So this is going to. We believe you're going to see sustained demand for a lot of these modern technologies. But let me also make it really, really clear. You take a category that was completely left for dead, like personal computers, right? Nobody wanted to buy a personal computer. That business grew 20% last year. On what planet did you expect that business would grow? And guess what? This year, we think it's probably going to be pretty much flat. So it's not going to give back all that demand. It's that people are going to continue to use these devices to experience a richer, more flexible hybrid world.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. No, we're definitely saying that across the board. I remember you and I were probably texting Michael Dell, hey, we've got a client that needs 1,000 laptops. Right? And I'm sure he's like, I've got to stockpile these for the government.
Yeah, and as we talked about, the supply chain, that's a real challenge. I mean, I don't think this is going to get any easier, because if you think about some of the supply chain woes that are out there, what people don't think about is that they hear, oh, well, it's all about semiconductors. Can't you just run the fabs? Well, the problem is really, really nuanced, okay? And that is that we're connecting all these low-cost gadgets to the internet. We have this thing called a car, which is basically a rolling network on wheels. And it's not about the high-value chips. The high-value chips are actually available. It's about those low-cost parts. It's about those parts. So in the semiconductor world, when the transistors are closer and closer together, it's fewer nanometers. So making a 7 or a 10 or a nanometer part, those are the really expensive products. It's the 100 nanometer part and the 200 nanometer. Those are the ones that, frankly, a low-cost factory in Asia needs to run. And those low-cost factories either haven't been running, or there's so much demand, those products can't get here. And guess what? Nobody wants a car where the anti-lock and braking system doesn't work, but the rest of the system works just fine. So if that's the problem, is that to have a whole system, you need a whole spectrum of parts that have different price points. And guess what? We can't supply all those right now, and we're probably not going to be able to till the end of this year.
We have never been so vulnerable. Go ahead, Vala. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna, we were touching on some of the emerging technologies. One of the things I'm super impressed is, there'll be a Twitter Spaces hosted by Aaron Levy talking about Web3, or Chris Dixon of Andreessen talking about public blockchains and DeFi and NFT. And I'm looking at the Twitter Spaces, and I see Crawford popped in, and I'm like, president of one of the largest analyst firms in the world, hanging out in Spaces with these bleeding edge VCs and startup entrepreneurs and founders of unicorn companies. And so I'm blown away that you still are so well connected to these leading thinkers doing stuff that the enterprise might not adopt for years. So again, that's just I'm just amazed at you.
Yeah,
There.
well,
It makes me feel good when I see that.
Yeah, you're very kind. I mean, look, Aaron's great, by the way. I love
He's one of my favorites. He was on the show a couple of months ago. He was on the show.
I actually spoke to him recently. He's awesome. Here's the thing. I always think back to, when whatever, any of us early in our career, right? All this stuff sounds really trite. But if you don't walk the walk, if you don't do it, if you don't care, if you're not passionate about it, then why the heck are you doing it? Like what are you doing it for? Like, I am the gadget master. Like, I'm always
I know that.
Yeah. And I'm always and I go on these things because I want to learn, because I feel like, if I'm not passionate about it, then why should anyone at IDC be passionate about it? Like, it's just in my DNA. It's why I get up every day. Back in the day when we were all in the office, I really was that guy who'd just drop in, walk through the cubes, hang out. Hey, what are you working on? What are we? And we would just sit and talk and learn about stuff. And I would actually my assistant would block time on my calendar to basically go and interact and do that. And I still, even virtually, we do every month where we just randomly select, 20 people, and we all sit and just talk for an hour, because I want to, it's an interaction, and it's a passion I have. And I feel like if I can impart it, and by the way, it's really selfish, I'm learning a ton. So
in this space, Web3, Meta, there's no books on this stuff. I mean, this is new, people, 69 million NFT, March of last year, kind of grew this multi-billion-dollar industry, and they're all interwoven, tokenization of internet, public blockchains, and all of this. But I see people commenting like, "Yo, did you notice President of IDC's here?" Yeah. And I want to say, "Hey, I know this guy."
Well, you're not gonna learn any other way. So you gotta be there. But
let's talk about this, right? Web3, metaverse. We're seeing DAOs as kind of the center, the governance body, the funding mechanism, the token economics happen there. We're seeing what's going on with crypto and value exchange. We're seeing the underpinnings of Web3. The interfaces are all changing, all that kind of stuff.
Back above 40K Bitcoin.
I don't comment on any prices of anything.
I need your disclosure page. How is this happening? Is it real? Are we gonna have another Second Life? Will Second Life get a second life? I mean, like,
does Second Life get a second life? So for starters, what I find so fascinating is how, for some reason, and Ray, I know you've forgotten more about this stuff than many people will ever know, but people bring the conversation of Web3 and the metaverse together, right? Mm-hmm. And in my mind, you have to kind of start with sussing them apart, which is kind of, in my mind, Web3 is very much using some core technology that's been around for a while, permission blockchains, adding, DAOs, authentication organizations to virtual goods, right? And being able to authenticate that. And being able to authenticate transactions, provenance, whether you attended an event, whatever it be. And I think that Web3, the idea is noble. I think it's going to take a long time before really you see massive, really massive adoption on a global scale. And we'll come back to that in a second. The metaverse is, to me, fascinating, right? Obviously, what Facebook is doing is a lot of, there's a whole other narrative around what was going on with that company and why they pivoted to Meta and why they're looking at the metaverse. But to me, the metaverse, people get confused with virtual and augmented reality. To me, the metaverse is about creating a virtual world that you can participate in. And that virtual world, and people really have to think about this, and that is that you're now participating in a virtual world. You can buy digital goods. They may be digital goods in a game, which takes you back to, how do you verify that transaction, which is back to Web3 and back to NFTs. But it might also be the certification of buying virtual land or a virtual piece of artwork or whatever. And I think what people think about is they think about the gaming aspect of the metaverse. And I think what's much more interesting about the metaverse is, no, you're potentially, when we get there, entering a virtual world that continues when you're not there. Okay. And so, you might want to buy a piece of virtual land. You might buy some digital goods, but the world will continue to exist. So I don't think people have sort of understood that giving your kid a credit card to buy a virtual good in a FIFA game on Xbox, that's a way to spend a fast $200. But if your kid buys, a big piece of virtual land or something, and that land goes to zero, the party doesn't stop. Just, basically, this can get really, really complicated and can continue for quite some time. So I think it is potentially a second life for Second Life, but we're miles from that. And I also think that what we haven't talked enough about is the bridge between digital goods and physical goods. And I think it's going to be a very long time. Regulation is there for a reason. It's going to be a very long time before we can have, physical goods being authenticated by DAOs and all the things you see on Web3.
That's
But the
great
scamming
distinction.
again.
Great distinction.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be crazy. So we're going to see a whole bunch of things that are there. But 500 million has been spent on digital land. Think about that already.
I know.
It's invested, right? That guy that's making $17,000 a week on digital gas. I want in on that.
Who doesn't?
Ray, I have a 19-year-old at Bentley. She's in the blockchain club, and she told me many, many months ago, like, are you investing in Mana, Decentraland? And these gamers, miners, they're spending a lot of their time in these digital worlds. And if you're Minecraft, Roblox, or gaming NFL, believe you me, you said fast 200, getting these skins that my son buys and increasing the quarterback rating by, there's just an incredible world.
It is real money in a
Real money.
digital world. And
Real
by the
money.
way, this is a bonanza for B2C brands. And B2C brands will continue to, because guess what? Nike shoes are really, really cool in real life, and they're really, really cool in a virtual world.
Oh, the street cred of a kid in high school a few years from now is their digital wallet and the NFTs and digital properties they own. Believe you me, that's the cool kids of the future. Very
What
near
do you
future.
have on your chain? I mean, that's going to be the question. No, we've been working about 24 different brands trying to figure out how to get into the metaverse with different strategies, and it ranges, right? It ranges anything from design to what you're trying to do around the DAO to the token economics, right? They're thinking about new business models, but this is definitely a very exciting space that you guys are definitely covering. We're seeing a lot of interest all across the board everywhere. I mean, from just the hardware, software, a complete stack. So,
Absolutely.
when is your big event? You're having a big event, right? You normally do this.
I'll be there.
Yeah. So we're having our Directions event March 8th in Boston, and then 2 weeks later in Santa Clara. We'd love for people to attend. If you're interested, please contact us. I look forward. It's going to be the first time in 2 years that we've had. We've done the event obviously virtually, but the first time physically that we'll be there. And so really looking forward to seeing everybody and doing some fist bumps and again, fingers crossed, right? I mean, all signals are go. We're fingers crossed on a physical event.
Exceptional event. I learn a ton every year, so I'm looking forward to attending.
And only Crawford Del Prete, president of IDC. Follow him on Twitter at CRAW and check out the event. So thanks a lot for being here.
Guys.
Happy Friday.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers. Ray, I'm telling you, I would go to these Twitter spaces with all these like VCs and startup founders, and he pops up and he's right at the and I see people like going back and forth. Oh, look at big guy at IDC's here. So it's pretty cool. It's like you. I see you in spaces. I see you hanging out and talking to folks on social.
I'm having some fun.
It's nice to see CEOs of analyst firms, sharing their wisdom. I think that's important. I think people and people also get validation that their work matters when they get an audience like yourself or Crawford attending these brainstorming and idea and sharing. Okay, recap of one of the most intense Tom Brady of enterprise first guest, Frank Slootman, to folks that are king and queen makers, to one of the brightest futurists and trusted advisor in the technology space. Your thoughts? By the way, for our 6-year anniversary show, what a way to celebrate a show. By the way, kudos to our producer, because I got to tell you, Al, Holly, both of you, like you got like an all-star team for our 6-year anniversary. So thank you for our producer.
Oh, Hannah, thank you very much. I want to thank everybody out here. I want to thank our guests, our wonderful community. Please keep making suggestions of who we should bring on the show. This year, we're going to focus, after our 6th anniversary, we're going to focus in on, the startup CEOs, the founders. We're going to talk about, the authors, the leaders, the big thinkers, right? The public company executives that are doing great work, right? The makers, the shakers and makers of the world, right? Economists, politicians, people that are actually have a tech policy bent that are interesting, right? And that's really kind of the focus. But Vala, thank you very much. It's been a fun six years. So it's one of the greatest partnerships,
it's funny. So it's hard work, right? We've interviewed 818 guests in 6 years. That's not easy because we both have day job. But I got to tell you, when you love what you do and you trust and respect and you care for the person you're with, it feels like play. It doesn't, hard work, but believe it or not, to me, it feels like play. So I appreciate you for being a friend, a mentor, a sponsor, and someone who's been guiding me for the last 10 years. So thank you. Thank you, my friend.
Hey, thank you. Who do we have for episode 267?
267. So next Friday, we have Mike Moray, founder, CEO of Scope Security, and Josh Corman, senior advisor to CISA. We have Maureen Burns, senior partner in Bain's customer practice and author of a book, Winning on Purpose, The Unbeatable Strategy of Loving Customers. And lastly, Scott Becker, partner at McGuire Woods.
That's perfect. Becker HIMSS is coming up. He's Becker's Healthcare. If people don't realize that is amazing. Well, hey, thanks everybody for following. If you watch us, catch us 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, most Fridays. And thanks for being here. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.